So my father came over, and he was a chef on the ships. He was a merchant marine for many years. He served he was here during World War II, and he served in the Merchant Marine Corps. And he transported war materials from the United States to Russia, which was one of the most dangerous corridors at that time for shipping. The Nazi or the Hitler submarines patrolled that area intensely, and they lost a lot of lives and a lot of men. My father did 3 trips. It was amazing.
Wow.
Most folks only do 1.
And was that how he was able to come here to the U.S., was through that ship?
Yeah. Well, that too. He migrated here without the intent of going to war, but the country went into war, and then of course, the best way he saw to serve was in the Merchant Marines, and so he did that. Then he met my mother, and my mother was from Tampa, Florida. Yeah. Her mother was from Asturias, that's the next province over from Galicia, where my family is from. So my father married my mother, and he worked in the Merchant Marines for a good period of time, I remember. And when I was 10, he bought a luncheonette restaurant combination kind of thing, had a counter. It was an old German type of restaurant, really wonderful. It was the old soda jerk kind of thing, and the ice cream, and then he had a kitchen, and he had meals, and everything was fresh.
And that's how he first made his living here in the U.S.?
And that was the first business that he bought. And he stayed in that business for years, many years, and he did very well. So it's a success story. A guy coming off a boat with nothing, and being able to, in his reality, having a much better life.
So when you had kids, your dad was the main breadwinner, and then
Mom stayed home.
Your mom stayed home and took care of you and your 2 younger brothers.
Exactly. And that was, once in a while she would go into the luncheonette and help him out here and there. But I started working for my dad when I was 11. Okay. Pretty much the way his dad treated him. Well, growing up in a Spanish family, that's what I spoke, Spanish. Mm-hmm. So when we were living downtown in Harlem area, and my parents thought best that I go to a Catholic school to learn English, as well as learn everything else. So that's what happened. I went into the first grade and learned the language. There weren't any bilingual programs or anything in those days, and I learned the language fast because nobody coddled me. I had to learn the language because that's what everybody was speaking in school. That's what they were talking in.
As the basis of symbolic culture, language is essentially the unique system of communication within a culture consisting of vocal sounds, gestures, and written symbols. For my Poppie, whose first language was Spanish, he had to adopt English as a second language in order to communicate most effectively here in America. Even in Spain, different dialects within the Spanish language exist depending on the region of the country you're in. For example, in Galicia, they speak Gallego, whereas in the next autonomous community over, Asturias, the Spanish dialect spoken there is known as Asturiano.
Then my father found an apartment up in the North Bronx, which was a real nice, clean neighborhood. To me, I miss Harlem. That's where I started growing up. And of course, I didn't know anything was bad around me, and I didn't know I was a poor kid. I was very happy and content with what I had. Everybody was pretty much the same. Blacks and white folks were there, and Latinos were there. So
it was a melting pot of really all different cultures.
It was a melting pot, yeah, really an easy neighborhood to grow up in. There was no competition. But the affluent neighborhood was not as easy. It was divided, and that North Bronx was divided. One side of one street were traditional Jewish Americans. They were very accepting and open-minded. So there was no problem as far as us integrating in that community. On the other side of the street were the more Irish, German, those kind of nationalities, pretty much were not so accepting.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was tough. It was tough growing up in that neighborhood from age 10 to till I became more of a man and able to stand for myself. So it was tough, but it was an experience that I wouldn't wish on anybody else. But I think that I learned a lot from it, and certainly it guides the way I think about, you know, folks that don't speak the language and coming into the neighborhood, and you know, that I remember when I was a child, I would never want to see that happen to anybody else. And bullying to me is a big thing. Then I always wanted to be a police officer. So it was in my mind ever since I was a little kid, that and horses. I was a big fan of horses, and I used to go down to the stables and clean the stables out, and I would get a free ride with the horse and so forth. But eventually I did. I was able to score high enough on the exam, civil service exam, to gain entrance into the academy. And the rest is history. I was a cop for 20 years. Well, for 20 years, I had had enough.
I bet.
The streets of New York City. And went back to school. I got an undergraduate degree while I was a cop. And then when I left the department, I went to Fordham University for my master's in social work. So, you know, to me, I only think about my dad getting off the boat with nothing. And here his son, his first son, is able to accomplish all of these things in this America. And with everything that may have that I didn't like, the bad experiences, certainly that other part certainly outweighs that.
Yes.
This is a great country of opportunity. And that's if you want to work for it. You know, you have to work hard. So with me it started with needing to learn how to speak English. You know?
Yeah.
So that's the way it was. Then, of course, I married Nana, and we had your mother, and we had her brother and another young sister. And then God blessed us by them having you and your brothers and our other grandchildren. So we feel very, very blessed and very, very fortunate. My father in Spain, the children at that time, they went to school 4 years. That was the average, and then they worked on the farm.
4 years total.
4 years total. And but it's a hard school. I mean, the school in Spain in those days, students had to learn, and they learned fast. Otherwise, you know, they had to suffer the consequences.
Yeah.
It's a whole different school.
Yeah.
Anyway, and he certainly always presented the option. He wanted me to be educated, at least through high school. And there was no discussion about leaving high school. And he always said that if you want to go to college, that I will pay for that, you know. But it was not, at that time, I wasn't ready for college. So I did other things, like going into the service, and I went to the academy and so forth. And then when I was in my mid-30s, I went to college. But I do see today, and eventually I went to graduate school, but I see today, when your mother was born and she was growing up, we impressed upon her the need to go to at least college. The gift was that she went to grad school, which was really a wonderful thing. And but there wasn't much of an option, for her at that time. I mean, she could have not gone to college. Her younger sister didn't go to college, so we didn't disown her. But 50-50. The kids 50% went to college, 50% went out into the work world, work world. But at that time, you didn't need.
Yeah.
You could get a good job.
Whereas now today, it's a necessity.
It's an extension.
Norms are the unwritten rules that are emphasized in a particular group. They serve to guide what actions and behaviors are acceptable and the ones that are looked down upon. They often stem from culture's values, which are overarching morals that dictate the good versus the bad and the favorable versus unfavorable life outcomes. Education has increased in value, thus making higher education a greater norm in the United States. For many immigrants, education was not essential. Instead, raising a family was valued much higher. In today's time, in order to raise a successful family, higher education helps to facilitate this goal.
Back when I was a child, they did go to church. And it was, even when I go to Spain to visit my family, we all make it a big deal to go to church together and to celebrate, to pray for the souls of our parents. The priest, as a matter of fact, is a cousin of mine.
Oh, wow.
From a different generation. So he did the mass. Like, I have this little medal that I wear every day, 24 hours. It's a scapular medal. And thinking about this medal, this is a medal we bought in Spain, and you can only get this kind of gold. It's an 18 karat gold, and a very clean yellow kind of gold. It never tarnishes. So you wear we believe that, and this is not something that was made up by the Spanish culture, just a Pope decreed this, that if you wear the scapular medal, that no matter what, you would always have a chance to get into heaven, which would be a last moment of saying, I'm sorry, forgive me my sins, or what have you, that you would get a chance to go into a better spiritual world. So that's one of but there are many different kinds of thinkings depending on what country Catholics are in and so forth that traditionally believed in. So a lot of Catholics don't know about this, but in Spain it was a big deal.
Material culture consists of physical objects that manifest meanings beyond their literal definition. While Catholicism in Spain contributes to symbolic culture, the scapular medals worn by many Spanish Catholics represents material culture. As discussed, this religious item carries great cultural and religious meaning.
That seems to be like the big overarching message though, is hope. The family has come so far just from thinking it all started getting onto a ship and starting a business to then you coming here and going to college and raising successful children who then have grandchildren who are going off to college. It's just such a great feeling to be a part of something that started from almost nothing.
Right. And all you need is the will and the opportunity. The will, we have control over the will, whether we want to do it or not do it. We have that choice. The opportunity is there. So we don't have to look for the opportunity. This is the opportunity that we have in this country.